Let's look at the updates and changes to ConnectWise service tickets in the new release. The first thing to notice is that all the fields that appeared in the last version of ConnectWise have been placed into pods. These pods can be arranged in any way that the user likes, and they're also expandable and collapsible. ConnectWise will remember each user's arrangement of pods and display it in the same arrangement the next time the service ticket is opened. The next thing to notice is the toolbar icons. While the toolbar contains the same buttons, the icons have been updated with new images representing each button. Now let's take a look at some of the fields that the pods contain. The summary pod has been moved to the top of the screen, and this is the only pod that cannot be rearranged or moved like the other pods. It should still describe and summarize the ticket. Now let's look at the company pod. The company pod contains most of the fields that appeared in the top left-hand corner of the screen in the last version of ConnectWise. I've already filled out my name with all the necessary information that was required for a ticket in the last version. Now let's move to the ticket pod. The ticket pod contains the status, the board, type, subtype, and item fields. They should still be filled out the same manner that they were filled out in the last version of ConnectWise. It's also important to know that the agreement field is now located underneath the ticket pod. Now let's move to the resources pod. There are two new additions to the resources pod. The Schedule Me button, which automatically assigns the user that's in the new ticket with the name and the current date. There's also a new Assign Me button, which does the same thing as the Schedule Me button but does not input a date. As in the last version of ConnectWise, only one resource can be added before the ticket is initially saved. Another new pod is the Initial Description pod. The Initial Description pod takes the place of the Detailed Descriptions pod in the last version of ConnectWise. And this should be filled out and describe why the ticket was initially created. Now let's go ahead and save it. Now the ticket has been initially saved, let's take a look at the tabs along the top of the screen. As you'll notice, all the tabs may appear in a slightly altered user interface, but still contain the same information with the same functionality. The only exception is the Open Tickets tab. This is replacing the Service tab, but will still show all the open tickets associated with the company on the ticket. Now let's go back to the Ticket tab so we can explore the Notes pod. As you see, the Initial Description pod remains separate. Now if we move to the Notes pod, we can see that the initial description entered before the ticket was initially saved appears in the Discussion tab. The Discussion tab is replacing the detailed descriptions in the last version of ConnectWise. There's now an Internal tab, which is replacing the internal analysis in the last version of ConnectWise. The Resolution tab, which name has not changed, and the All tab, which shows all entries into the ticket in chronological order. Now let's take a look at the Resources pod. As you can see, it looks different, but the functionality has not changed. with some exceptions. To add a new resource, you have to use the new item icon, which is changed, but will open up and display the same fields as in the last version of ConnectWise. There is also a new Save and New button, which will save a resource and open up a new template to add additional resources. Also, you'll notice that the email resource display pop-up window has also changed. It does look different, but it still contains the same information. And as you can see, since I hit the Save and New button, it's opened a new blank resource template to easily add more resources. Now overall, the user interface has changed, but the functionality has not. So let's save this ticket, and that will conclude this video.